Today, after the final shape and in the light of some new Solstice lore, we dive into the stories of Crow, Ikora Rey, and Zavala. After that final cutscene, the Vanguard leaders now look to the future, express their inner struggles, and define their new roles in the last city, reflecting on their journey and missions yet to come. Let's take a look at some new lore. These entries come from the new Sublime Solstice armor sets. The lore tabs can be found on each of the class items for the armor, the cloak, bond, and mark. Let's first begin with the cloak, talking about Crow, who reflects on his new position as Hunter Vanguard and past as Aldrin Sov. He vows to be a better person and remember the words of the man they called Cade. We celebrate the future we will build together. The city has changed, at least for Crow. The memory of a mask still weighs against his face, but he walks tall now and finds he's welcome at a solstice bonfire whenever he sidles up to one. He knows it's the sort of festival not just for race, but also for celebration of those you stand hand in hand with, of the future that may yet be built together. Today, Crow has friendship on his mind. Like the logs he watches crackle in the fire, so many of his connections are half burnt for one reason or another. Cade, more than others, lingers in his thoughts. Not only for his brief sojourn through Crow's new life, for the lost potential friendship that might have existed in another time and place, but also simply for the sort of person he was. In the moment, Crow wonders what Cade would have to say about this navel gazing. Keep moving forward, probably. So, what next? I don't know how to meet people, Crow says aloud to Glint. It sounds so stupid. I just think I forgot how when it comes to people who aren't guardians. Glint buzzes gently, his iris bright against the dark evening sky like a floating spark. We could take a class, he says, with all due thoughtfulness. Not about meeting people though, maybe pottery. Crow laughs, feeling that spark in his heart, lighter than the burdens that weigh on him. He thinks how fortunate he is to build a future together. With Glint, with the Vanguard, with people he hasn't even met yet. All right, he says, something new, and a hesitation teetering on a precipice. Maybe I'll wander down to the tower hangar, see if anyone there knows some tricks I don't. No standing still, only moving forward. Cade would approve. So it's nice to get some of these cards in Solstice after the events of the final shape. We've seen some of these stills from the cutscene of the Vanguard leaders going out on missions and bonding together after the final shape, and we can only assume that will continue in the future, the stories they will tell beyond, but here we get looks into their minds and what they're thinking. Crow looks back on that friendship with Cade, realizes that Aldrin Sov is gone. He's now Crow, he's with the city, the Vanguard leaders, and they will push forward together. In the Warlock Bond, Ikora sits in silence trying to meditate, but a hidden member, Chauko, interrupts her moment of peace. Ikora contemplates the weight of leadership after all this time and her roles in both the Vanguard and guiding the hidden. Little noises catch Ikora's attention, sounds of shifting and settling, fidgeting. Drawn from her meditation, Ikora slits her eyes open to look accusingly across the coffee table. The expected culprit, Chauko, sits perfectly still. A ball of swirling, silent void rests between the hunter's hands. Perhaps she is innocent. Feeling downright restless by comparison, Ikora forces her eyes closed again. She counts her breaths, she clears her mind. The moment extends, balanced on the head of a pin. The light in her pulses softly with her heartbeat. Cloth rustles. Ikora pointedly makes her breathing louder. She will embrace peace in this moment. She has meditated through 100 distractions before, through the din of pitched battle and crushing heat. She will not cede this ground here and now. And yet, when Ikora finally turns her inner gaze unflinching upon herself, ignoring the whisper-quiet sounds of a knife resheathing. She would simply rather be out in the sunlight with a friend. There are days, after all, when it is better to yield. She is not so proud that she cannot admit this. Ikora unfolds herself from her seat, eyes turned again on Chauko, who appears tranquil, shimmering faintly with the calm stillness of void. "All right," Ikora says, "you win." Chauko is in motion in an instant, and the violet energy vanishes neatly as she vaults to her feet. She smiles, a little sly, a little knowing. It is useless to try feigning annoyance. As they leave Ikora's personal library, Ikora falls into step with Chauko, and they take the hidden way out together. Dim artificial lighting gives way eventually to true sunlight, to a tower decorated in gold and greenery. Ikora basks in warmth. The moment feels right in a way it hadn't before. "The things I saw in the pale heart," she says aloud. Chauko slows her steps for Ikora's lingering. "Yeah?" "I think I'll need the worst dumplings in the city," Ikora says, to explain. Chauko laughs and Ikora's restlessness settles. So Ikora Rey is in the city trying to meditate during Solstice when Chauko is stirring her up a bit. Ikora Rey is a part of the Vanguard, but she also runs her secret group called the Hidden. She always has. Chauko is her close friend and a member of this group, and Ikora is sort of weighing these leadership roles, wrestling with this secrecy and need for trust, balancing her leadership roles with her own personal life. The Pale Heart clearly had an effect on Ikora from that card and from the events we saw, like meeting Cade. But at the end of the card, she's able to let up a little bit, and it gets a little more lighthearted. She's ready for the future.
No. It's too much. It's just too much. It's one thing for the witness to look in our hearts and minds, to conjure up our memories, but this...
Ikora, come on, look at me.
I see you.
I know this is hard. It's tough for me too.
Tough? What do you know about tough? You are always running off to play renegade, leaving me and Zavala to shoulder all the responsibility when we were supposed to be a team.
In our last card, the Titan Mark, Zavala meets with Sloane for a bit to get a bite and a drink. They reflect on the battle and Zavala's duty as a protector of the city, leader of the Guardians. Zavala feels pressure more than ever in his role as commander, but remains resolute in his commitment to defending this place, no matter the personal cost. There's been tons of this for him over the years, think back to seasons like Haunted and even in the final shape. Despite personal troubles, he's always been there. The atmosphere inside Renpierre's hits Zavala differently today. Sounds are muted, the lights harsh. He stops to stare sidelong at a piece of art on the wall. Bold colors streak across the canvas, evoking the shape of a helm. How long has that been there, he wonders to himself. A hand on his shoulder startles him, shaking him free of his reverie. Zavala turns to see Sloane. She guides him to her table. He sits opposite her, his gaze fixed on the errant flower petals and stripe of celebratory tinsel caught in the crook of her breastplate. "Got held up by the festivities?" she asks. Zavala grunts a non-committal agreement. "Where's Shiokan?" he interjects. Sloane shrugs. "With Glint, last I saw, catching up." Her nonchalance makes Zavala shift uneasily. They place their orders, Sloane never glancing at the menu she's already rememorized. Zavala taking too long to find as usual, tucked away on the menu's backside. Was it always there? He orders with extra spice. Sloane sips her tea for a moment, watching as Zavala forces his focus elsewhere. "Having any trouble?" she asks after a long while. "With what?" Zavala replies, pretending not to hear the depth of her question. Sloane adjusts her inquiry. "Stasis must be an adjustment." He recognizes the shift in her strategy. alters his own to match. Opinions on darkness have been changing, he says flatly. I didn't ask what everyone else thinks, I asked you, Sloane reiterates. My opinions may be adjusting as well. She nods. Change is hard, but if there's anyone I'd trust to handle that kind of thing, it's you, Sloane says frankly. Steaming bowls of noodles appear. Zavala is grateful for them suddenly, though the strength of his gratitude for such a distraction troubles even him. How's the Vanguard holding up? Strangely, Zavala admits. He pokes at his noodles, watches the steam coil up into the air. It was hard to believe we'd get this far, and now we're adapting to this new way of living, I suppose. It will get better, one day at a time, she reassures. It sounds like a platitude, save for the fact it's Sloane saying it. It's hard to see it that way sometimes. Zavala says this to his noodles. Even if things are different, we're doing this together, Sloane says. Her hand comes into his field of view, resting atop his. Zavala finally glances up. Don't forget that. A look of understanding passes between them as Sloane gives Zavala's hand a reassuring squeeze. The physical contact grounds him. Despite it all, when he considers the future, there is still a gentle warmth. Perhaps distant, perhaps small. It will grow. So as we mentioned, Zavala's been through a lot, and since the return of Commander Sloane back in Season of the Deep, she's sort of been there for him in certain moments. The mention of the restaurant they're at was actually in dialogue back in that season. Here's some audio thanks to Destiny Lore Vault.
I think we're clear for extraction over here.
Noted. Dispatching a transmit beacon.
Commander, the menu's still the same at Rhine-Pierre's, right?
The menu's had some additions to accommodate our Elixni allies. But yes, it will be the same as you remember it. I'll have Sync call in an order.
And while we're at it, I thought I'd throw this lore entry in here as well from the time-worn Wayfarer weapon. This one has to do with Zavala taking up one of his favorite hobbies after the final shape's madness, knitting. Here's parts of the card. His thoughts were interrupted by a high-pitched mechanical chirp and a flash of white light at the corner of his eye. Zavala furrowed his brow. The console at his side flashed again and emitted a string of data. He hesitated for a moment, but didn't put his knitting down. Ikora, he called. The warlock appeared on the holoprojector in a burst of visual noise. Zavala, Ikora said warmly. I see you've picked up your project again. Indeed. I've just received an alert from Nessus. Saint and Failsafe are handling it. Failsafe? Failsafe. The Vanguard commander nervously coiled a strand of yarn around his forefinger. It went taut, pulled thin by the gesture, but then he loosened it, relaxing his grip on the needles. Then I'll leave it in their capable hands, or processor as the case may be. Good. Ikora's tone was chiding, but she smiled in the static. Zavala nodded. Keep me updated, Ikora continued. On what? Zavala asked. The warlock nodded to the knitting. The status of my sweater. Zavala smiled. The hologram faded into air and silence. Zavala slid the working needle between his fingers and rested it against a calloused knuckle. But Guardians, that's all we got for today's video. Some updates on the Vanguard, their thoughts about the current situation, and their hopefulness for the future. If you'd like to see some more Destiny lore and mysteries just like this, please be sure to subscribe to the channel. I thank you very much for watching, and I'll catch you all in the next video.